Hi, I'm Katie, and this is the Free Art and Design School podcast, web series, whatever. And today we have Brian, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Brian Ngo. I'm going to be coming this school year, a fifth year high school English teacher.
Fifth year. Oh my God. I did not realize it's been that long. That's crazy. Um,
Yeah.
so wait, does that mean your first year you were getting a master's degree while you were teaching? Or
Uh, I think I was like student teaching. I didn't count that. So I think my first year was probably 2019 to 2020.
got it.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, what's that experience like going straight through from college to being an educator?
It was definitely fast paced. I think during my student teaching year, I had to not only student teach, I had to take grad school classes. I had to apply for the EdTPA, which is basically how you get your teaching credential and then find a job. So actually teaching, it was nerve-wracking, but it was actually somewhat less work than trying to apply to be a teacher.
Got it. Wow, that's insane to think about. So you started teaching right before COVID, and then you
Yeah,
like the arc of the COVID pandemic. What's that sort of journey been like?
yeah, it was a little strange. I at least started my teaching career in person, but that was like the COVID year. So I think around March, like the last quarter of my first school year teaching, we went to online. And that was very unexpected. I think, yeah, the students were thrown off guard. I think I transitioned somewhat well because I was very flexible. It was like my first year teaching, and I already knew a lot of how to use tech tools. So it wasn't too hard for me, but obviously, I don't think the students got as a quality of an education online.
Yeah. What do you think? Because you're an English teacher, right? English
Yeah,
teacher. Um,
yeah.
what like sort of unique challenges do you think high school students were facing? Because I was doing Zoom masters, or I was doing a master's program on Zoom
Yeah,
at the same time, and that was like super stressful. But I was old enough to have like I don't know some sort of understanding of like
yeah,
my place in life. I feel like younger students were just sort of like totally thrown for a loop.
yeah. I would say definitely the lack of community or
Mm.
personal interaction. I think especially since I taught freshmen, like that still is a very young age and they need like those human interactions. I think the class I taught the first year during COVID, at least they started the school year in person. But next school year, like those were freshmen coming from very different middle schools, and now they all had to be in like a Zoom classroom together. Definitely felt like there was almost little to no sense of community, which was pretty hard for them.
That's horrible. What did you try to do to make that better? I feel like that's such a like crazy thing to have to be thrown into.
Yeah, it was tough. I think especially since like 95% of students wouldn't want to have their video camera on. Like you didn't really know who was in the Zoom call with you unless you already knew them from middle school, right?
Yeah.
Um, I did tiny things like icebreaker questions so they could at least see answers that other students were answering, personal stuff about like what was going on the weekend, what things did they value. I also had this thing called like musical mystery guest where you would send like trivia, like unknown facts about yourself. I'd put on a slide and then people had to guess like who in the classroom it could have been. And
Ooh.
then once they reveal it, they could do like a Q&A on their thing. It's kind of like what we did at Stanford where I think it was called like Spotlight or something.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But they got to it's called musical mystery guest because they also got to choose the song that played at the very beginning of class as people were logging in.
Oh my God. Do you get anything inappropriate?
No, I fact checked before I put things on the slide. Yeah.
Oh my God. The benefit of being a young teacher. One of the other guests that I've interviewed for this series, what is a high school Spanish teacher. And
Mhm.
he's a little older than we are, but he had a similar sort of arc where he like started teaching and then COVID hit and he was like he thinks that people our age handled it a little bit better because we're more flexible, and then our
Mhm.
generation in general is sort of like more in tune with mental health checks and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, and I was wondering if you were sort of like what your educational philosophy is, because like being an English teacher, you're also sort of I don't know. All the English teachers I had were more life coaches or like
Yeah.
literature is about like what it's like to be a human and like be on this planet. And I was wondering sort of how that
Yeah.
influences your lessons.
Yeah. I would say it's somewhat similar. Like definitely with English, we're analyzing and sharing stories, talking about like issues like drug addiction, like romance, class inequality through the stories that we read. So I'm really interested in like discussions and having like four corner debates, having Socratic seminars, having small group or partner activities where we just discuss these topics. And I think students really enjoy English class when they see how it connects to their personal lives or it connects to their future. So I often try to take it outside the realm of just the literature or the short story that we're reading and ask like, if you were in this situation, what would you do? Or if this issue came across in your own life, like what do you think is the best course of action to take? Things like that.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. It's sort of become, I went to a religious high school, and I feel like that's sort of what we did in our ethics classes, is we were like, how would God help you with these challenges?
Yeah,
But then, yeah, our literature class was like the secular version of that.
yeah,
And I don't know, like English literature feels sort of, um, I feel like you have some students who are like really, really into it, and then some students who like aren't as connected to it because they think they're just reading like old books that like
hmm
don't necessarily have any sort of relevance to their uh,
yeah.
life. How do you go? Do you get to choose like what books you read, or is it like there's like a larger list you get to pick from, and then you get to like choose from there?
Teaching the Bay Area, luckily, there's not many restrictions on what you can teach as long as you get approval from your department chair ahead of time. But even then, rarely does anything get rejected. I work with a team of three other junior level English teachers, so we like to teach similar books so that way we can share and collaborate on materials.
Mm,
I could go off on my own at my school, but I like collaborating with others, so I'm teaching the same books as the other teachers, which right now include like Kindred by Octavia Butler, The Crucible by Arthur Miller, Great Gatsby, of course, and a pretty modern book called There by Tommy Orange.
oh, someone just recommended that to me.
Oh yeah, that's great.
I'm a little above high school level, not very much. So,
Yeah.
Um, okay, I have two sort of questions that are um, not related to anything else. The first is, how do you feel about book bans sweeping the country, and how do you feel about AI like allowing students to sort of like cheat on essays?
Mm,
I don't know if either of those. Obviously, there aren't book bans in California, thankfully, but
yeah.
I'm wondering if you have sort of thoughts about those two sort of creative uh,
Yeah.
restrictions.
But yeah, I think obviously as someone who loves literature, it's always unfortunate when it gets banned in some parts of the country. I think the power of stories is sharing experiences from different perspectives that you can't experience in your own life easily. And so you can pick up a perspective from any country, any background, gender, class, and really understand and learn to empathize with that. And so when you ban those narratives, I think it just cuts off empathy that you could have for others. And I think people should have the choice to disagree if they're going to disagree eventually with the perspective that they're reading, but you should be able to have that choice, bar none,
Yeah,
I would feel.
yeah, that's great, and I completely agree. And it's very disheartening that it feels like we live like 100 years in the past.
Yeah. Luckily in California, it's not as much of an issue, but I can understand how it's more distressing in other parts of the country.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then have you noticed anyone using AI to write their papers?
I actually had a couple students last
Ooh.
year, but it's very obvious because the students who usually try are ones that struggle to begin with. And so all of a sudden you have students who can barely write an essay to writing a college level essay in the course of 1 month, which almost never happens. And
Right.
then when you ask them about it, they'll admit it. Especially with that discrepancy, you show them what they wrote before and what they had just submitted. And I actually had one essay where, since it was a more obscure Zora Neale Hurston short story, all the quotes that were in their essay were fake. Like I would use Control F and I couldn't find it anywhere in the short story.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I bring it up because one of my other friends from one of my friends from high school is like also an English teacher in San Francisco. And she the other day posted this thing on her Instagram where she was like talking to Chat GPT and she was like, I am worried that you will allow future generations to cheat and that you are destroying education. And then the Chat GPT like responded, like, it's fine, or something. And I was like, wow, I never even thought about how like, I don't know. I'm curious whether you think in the future, like writing an essay will even be like a thing that students have
Mm,
to do. Uh,
yeah. I I don't know. I think it's a good question. I think obviously using AI to plagiarize is, it's not good for your development, for your education. But at the same time, I think I do have some issues with the essay as a form of test. I
yeah,
think it I think at the high school level, English teachers tend to just give essays because they know they'll be given at the college level, and not necessarily because like the skills that are in the essay are critical thinking and organization, which would be important. But I think there are other tests that you could devise that would be more engaging that could test out those same skills.
like what? I'm very
I,
curious.
I think some classic ones are like if you want to make an argumentative essay, you could instead have them write a speech that they have to actually, you know, address an actual audience
Yeah.
or write a letter of petition. I think if you want people to organize, like you could have them make, I don't know, like a YouTube video essay, but again, some students are not versed in video editing. But like things like that, like where would you find those skills later on after high school in a student's life? And can you make something that would, replicate that better? Because to be honest, like 95% of students are probably not going to write an essay once they get out of college.
That's so sad. I write essays all the time.
Yeah, I mean
Oh, right.
they're fun for us, obviously, but I think they're not as engaging for most students.
Damn. How do you like I remember in college, I started as a physics major and I like very quickly realized I was not good at physics, not I hated problem sets. I didn't wasn't
Mhm,
good at the math. I didn't want to do coding, but I felt the same revulsion towards writing essays from my tech friends. Like
mhm.
literally, all of my physics friends were like, I would rather die than write an essay. And I was like,
Yeah,
it's crazy because writing an essay is just like you put your thoughts on the paper. And I
yeah.
guess it's easier for some people than others. But like, is there something you do to kind of cultivate a love of writing and reading in students
Mhm.
who are like super averse to it? Because that's obviously pretty tricky.
Yeah, especially since it's such a core of English classes. I think the reading part, I kind of go back to what I said with the book bans. Like I try to engage students' curiosity with, you might feel like this is a book from someone who lived 100 years ago, and like with the case of the Great Gatsby, it is. But they have interesting thoughts on like romance, cheating, how wealth influences how you are attracted to someone, and those things are still relevant. Like people have class influence their decisions about their relationships all the time nowadays. And I think that helps draw them in,
Yeah.
especially since we get to talk about for that unit like a lot of like tricky things about relationships, like should you like someone who's in a relationship currently? Is it ethical to keep pursuing them? And they get really into it, discussing it with their classmates.
Oh my God.
Um,
It's my
but
religious ethics class all over again.
yeah,
No
so,
cheating.
except more secular, obviously.
Um, that's so interesting. I often wonder, like, because those themes are often what become really addicting in media, Netflix shows, like TikTok,
Mhm,
whatever. Like, um, one of my classmates during my MFA program, her thesis was like trying to get people to read more, and
mhm,
like especially like younger, our generation and younger. And so she was trying to create like a digital platform. Like, we have e-readers, we have Kindles, we have stuff like that, but we don't have anything sort of like, there's no way to shift the model of a book into being more engaging. Like
mhm,
there's no sort of, or not readily available. Like there aren't really apps that like either make a game out of reading or like ask you questions along the way or have a sort of like communal um,
mhm,
element altogether. And so that was like the problem she was trying to
mhm.
solve. But then the issue was like then it didn't become a reading experience because you were distracted by like all of these other things, right?
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
you can't reinvent the wheel because like, the book took hundreds of years to like perfect, and there's
Yeah.
a reason it is the way it is. How do you sort of, maybe you don't even view it as a fight between the attention of your students towards reading and other media, but like
Mhm.
have you, I guess you haven't been teaching long enough to have multiple generations of experience, but do you see the effect of like social media sort of like more impacting the generations you're teaching than like the one that we're a part of or like older?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's hard to qualify exactly how, but I think since we grew up as technology was developing instead of always having had technology when we grew up, I do think students like probably spend more time on social media than on average we did. Probably are affected like in terms of like body image or security or what's it, insecurity by social media a lot more. But I think they're aware of like at least by the time they're juniors, they're aware of like the drawbacks and benefits of social media,
Mm,
and they're aware of like how to use it responsibly. Um, and I think for them, it's just like another aspect of like life for them. Like
yeah,
they could engage with it as much as they want to and be addicted to it, or they could be offline and choose to do other things with their life.
that's great. I was not a responsible social media user when I was a junior in high school. I'm not even one now. Um, that's also such a great point for why it's good to read older literature because it gives you a perspective into what life was like before now.
Yeah.
I think when you're young, life can feel very inescapable, and the problems that
Hmm.
you have feel like they're shackles. And
Hmm.
seeing someone else dealing with similar problems 100 years ago is in some ways enlightening and in some ways a little depressing. Like, oh God, this country
Yeah.
have these problems.
Yeah, definitely. Depending on the book you read.
Yeah. Um, what I guess I should have asked this earlier in the interview. What made you want to be an English teacher specifically, as opposed to
Mm.
another subject?
I think I really loved my junior American literature class, which it happens to be what I'm teaching now. I think before then I wasn't really interested in any particular subject when I was a high school student. But I just love the fact, as I said, you can read these different perspectives, you can discuss them with others, you can figure out people's opinions and have a discussion about it. And that was really engaging to me in a way that I hadn't felt in a different subject.
Hmm.
So when I wanted to be a teacher, I knew immediately that I also wanted to be an English teacher because in a way I'm kind of giving back what my American literature teacher in high school gave on to me.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing. That's actually, I haven't talked to you a ton about the point of this web series, but it's for something called the Free Art and Design School, and that was like my thinking. Also, is like I've had the
Mm.
benefit of and the privilege of going to amazing universities, learning a lot, having a lot of really incredible teachers, and I felt the sort of desire to um, pay forward to
Yeah.
people, like having access to free resources and free sort of discussions about art and education and how to like make those things better. Um,
Yeah.
and I think the sort of way education is set up in this country in particular is very strange.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, I mean, I totally understand why, but it's upsetting to me that there are not a ton of like free educational resources that aren't
Mhm.
like, Khan Academy, for example, like specific YouTube tutorials about like math problems.
Mhm.
And I wanted to have more space for those sort of like critical conversations and like theoretical discussions online,
Yeah.
which is why I've asked you to like come talk to me about what it's like to be an English
Yeah.
teacher. Um, do you think like, well, have you enjoyed the past 5 years now that you've had like so many different like data points of experience being a teacher? Like looking back on your work, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, definitely, I think teaching, it all depends on the classroom environment you're in. I think for some people, it can be very stressful. Like maybe the students, you don't know how to run a classroom well, or maybe you're not paid well, or the conditions of the school district are tough. So in that case, I can understand why a lot of people feel burnt out for teaching. I think conversely, I feel very lucky in that the school district I work on pays well, it has great benefits. The students, even at the regular level I teach, they're all like great personalities. They have great humor. I love interacting and building relationships with them. So overall, I feel very lucky to have had the teaching career that I've had so far. Um, some days, obviously, the students can be annoying or frustrating because, again, they're still teenagers. But I think it overall is offset by like the great people I get to work with, both like my coworkers and the students themselves.
Oh, that's awesome. Not many people can say that about their working environment,
Yeah.
education or otherwise. So that's really cool. What do you think if you could talk to yourself from 5 years ago, like just entering well, other than
Mhm.
COVID, other than being like,
Yeah.
the world is about to end, what sort of things have you learned in the past 5 years that you would give as advice to your younger self?
Mm, I think coming into the profession, I was a very anxious person. Like I very much worry, like, because I'm an introvert, like I worried, could I handle managing a classroom of 30 students? Could I handle, being a competent teacher? How would the students learn in this space? I think it's very easy to tell my younger self like it'll work out and that you just need to, find ways to get comfortable and relax and it'll take time. Um, I don't know if that would help my younger self because that's not usually how anxiety goes away. But
No,
I
it's
feel
like
like,
advice. It's like it'll be fine.
yeah, but objectively speaking, it's comforting to know that at some point you'll make it and it's just a matter of experience and learning to deal with anxiety in ways that work for you.
Yeah, yeah, it feels like most of adult life is like managing anxiety and expectations and just
Yeah.
figuring it out. It's so funny talking to like my parents about like job stuff. And they're like, it was so different. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I don't think things are getting easier or better.
No.
I think technology has ruined so much, as much
Yeah.
as it's made other things easier and more accessible. What are you personally reading now that you're enjoying, or do you not read because you're so busy dealing with the reading of the children?
I usually save my reading for the summer. So right now I'm trying to catch up on a few books that I've had in my backlog for probably 3+ years. I feel like every reader has a long backlog. So I read earlier in the summer Light in August by Faulkner
Okay.
because I really enjoyed As I Lay Dying.
Wow.
And
No one has ever, the only people who say that are English teachers.
yeah. And I don't know, I just really love how deplorable everyone is in As I Lay Dying, but you find a way to like, well, some people find a way to sympathize with some of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
He
give
does
that.
like he does like the rotting South pretty well, and I enjoy that for some reason. And
Okay.
and then let's see. I'm planning to read in the future, I think another Toni Morrison novel. I've only read Beloved.
Mhm.
So I was probably gonna read Song of Solomon in the near future.
It's exciting. Have you read any contemporary lit?
Probably the most recent one was just There because I had to teach it. I really recommend that one. That one was pretty good.
What do you like about it?
Um, it's from a Native American author who was raised in Oakland, so it's very topical to the students. Um, and it's from 2018, so I feel like for the most part, if you learn about Native Americans in English class, it's usually like very traditional, like reservation life. I think it's nice that this one's about like urban Native Americans.
Yeah.
And it deals with some pretty heavy issues like alcoholism, drug abuse, identity. I think it can be really relevant because I think a lot of novels before the 21st century don't exactly address things like alcoholism or drug abuse or addiction or social media abuse that there tackles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I was just thinking about things that we read in English class in high school, and I remember being not turned off, but like I was always surprised how mature the themes in the books we read in high school were. Like
Mhm.
obviously if you're reading Shakespeare, there's a lot of like murder, like, you know.
Yeah.
But I remember, I mean, we read this book that was like a modern adaptation of King Lear, and there was like a lot of incest in it for some reason.
Yeah.
And I was like, why are we talking about this? And I still don't think we should have read it in high school, but I'm also maybe prude. But I
Yeah.
think um, what's interesting is that English class like allows students to be tackling topics like that that normally they don't really get to talk about. Although I guess social media also has really changed the landscape of how like younger generations are talking about social issues. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I think probably most of the discourse that they're having is like on TikTok, where they're learning about like news issues and like social constructs and whatnot.
Mhm.
Maybe not in the healthiest way because they don't have a curator like you who can be like, hey, let's talk about it in this direction or this light.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. Do you have any sort of thoughts about like how to I guess every teacher has a sort of set of values that you're trying to like instill in your students through your guidance. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering like how you personally like cultivate that. Or maybe it's just, I mean, you're also a really good person. So I feel like that's sort of easy. You're just like, be like, view the world this way and it'll be fine. Um,
Yeah.
but maybe,
Um, I think, I mean, I personally value empathy the most, but I think it's really something that you could discuss these stories. You can explain the motivations and explore the flaws of the characters and try to understand why they're so messed up in the way that they're messed up. Some students will resonate. Well, some students will have still after that discussion with others, like no sympathy for some characters at all, you know? So I think at the very least they are exposed to these different perspectives. Whether or not it leads to empathy, I think is still an individual thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it is taste. Like there's some
Yeah.
characters that I won't empathize with because I think they're written poorly or they're not
Hmm.
believable. And
Hmm.
maybe that's a defect in my character to not be like overly empathetic.
I don't think so. I think it's just circumstances, you know?
Yeah, it depends. I just read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I don't
Hmm.
know. If you haven't read it, you should read it. I think you'd really enjoy it. It's about like building computer games in like MIT in Los Angeles, and it's like
Hmm.
it takes place like I guess 10. I'm trying to like do the it's like in the 80s to like 10 years ago,
Yeah.
basically. And it's fictional. And it's really interesting because I was like reading it and I was like, wow, like I love this. I love these characters. I think these are like really novel ways to like approach writing relationships. And then one of my friends, also from Stanford, who also has like she'll post about every book she reads. She was
Mhm.
like, oh, I hated this. Like I didn't empathize with any of the characters. They were all terrible people.
Yeah.
And I sort of wonder like English is one of the most subjective subjects in a sense, right? Like we all talk differently, we all have like different opinions. And I sort of wonder like how you could have a work of art like a novel and have it interpreted differently by every single person who like reads it. Like I wonder
Mhm.
like when you're in the classroom and you are having people read a book, like how you like I don't know, like is there truth or is everything sort of subjective? Like clearly there has to be some truth for you to teach something.
Yeah. I think definitely, well, I mean, the fact that everyone just reacts differently, that's just how art is. So the
Yeah.
fact the fact that English is, I guess you're right, like between all the subjects in high school that you're required to take, English is the one where you analyze mostly art. Um, I feel like the truth is just, can you make a subjective argument logically sound
Yeah.
for the most part? Because everything that they argue in their writing or in their discussions, should be logical and it should be backed up with reasoning. It's just a matter of like you can have your opinion and someone disagrees, but did you provide the evidence to support it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some kinds of like essay, like are your essay prompts like really open and like you're sort of fine with whatever anyone argues? You just want to make sure that the argument is set up well, or
It's in the middle. I provide usually 3 to 6 essay prompts for every book. So, for example, with The Crucible, they may argue, is the main character like a hero because he sacrifices himself, or is he a flawed character? Well, I mean, it could be both, but is he not a hero in the traditional sense because he is just acting his own interest, and also he has an affair during the novel. Yeah.
Damn. And so you let them pick any side of it and argue it.
Yeah.
You don't have a personal right answer.
No, definitely not.
How do you this is like one of the worst questions I could ask, but like how do you make someone a better writer?
Um, it's just practice. It's iteration. I think the hard part about essay writing for some of these students is that they only practice it while they're in the English classroom, or they only attempt it while they're in the English class. And so probably for some of them, they've maybe struggled in the past and they feel very pessimistic about their skills. Maybe some of them have like failed to complete past essay assignments. So I think when I get them at the junior level, it's just like starting very small. Like, can you do a first draft? Can you do like half a first draft?
Yeah.
And then we can work on it from there. I really like to give them like a frame. Like you'll have suggested sentence starters for each part of the essay, and then I'll explain to you like what's the function of the sentence. Like these are example topic sentences. If you're getting stuck, just pick one of them and then fill in the relevant details that would work for the essay prompt that you're working on.
Hmm.
And that helps them a lot because I think like definitely we're both Stanford grads, so like we understand how to write an essay, but for some people they have no idea. Like they have no idea like where some sentence should go. Like they have no idea how much analysis you should have after evidence and what should explain, right? So I think just spelling it out for them, and then once they feel more comfortable, like sure, later on in college, once they get those basics down, then they can have more freedom to play with like a form of an essay or what they're trying to do in an essay. But I think at the high school level, they just need some of those basic examples.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've never thought about approaching an essay in a sort of technical way. I had a really good, my high school was good at certain things, bad at other things, and now they're better at most things. It's an all girls high school, so they did not have the best science department when I was younger. And when I asked for an AP physics class, they were like, the girls won't take that. And I was like, that's horrible. And then now they have like computer science classes and things are better.
That's great.
Yeah, I was like, damn, where was this 10 years ago? Maybe I'd actually be a physicist. But no, it's fine. I'm having more fun doing this. I think like when I got to Stanford, I never took an English class. And I had no interest, partially because I viewed philosophy classes as just English classes, like with a different flavor. But because of that, I never learned sort of like how to develop a personal fictional style or a personal like I've learned a lot more since I graduated, basically just like you said, sort of by practice and by like reading other people's work that I really admire. Although sometimes I found that if I'm reading something and then I start writing like them, and that's I don't want to be a copycat. I was wondering if you do any projects that are more like sort of I guess you've listed some like creative assignments and like different like writing letters to editors and different like role playing and stuff like that. Do you find stuff like that is like more engaging to students to like break out of like a typical mold of like, oh, you have to write this essay? It's like daunting.
Yeah, I think I think it's like 70-30, where 70% of the students will appreciate something not an essay, but you always have some students who feel very comfortable doing something that they know. So they'll enjoy an essay a lot and they'll stick to an essay. But I think a lot of students, since they usually have to write an essay in most English classes, they appreciate anything that is outside the box.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm hoping future generations get more and more unruly. Uh,
Yeah.
that's my goal in life as an educator.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're right at the end. I was wondering if you had um, any life advice to other educators, to future educators, to people who feel stuck teaching students who don't want to listen. Just any sort of general life advice that you would give.
Yeah. So like teachers who are feeling like burnt out or
Yeah, that's a good one. That's the best question.
yeah. I think it's mostly the environment that you're in when you're working. Like it doesn't seem obvious, but is the school that you're at suited to your philosophy? Does it have the resources that make sure that you can be successful? Does it treat you with respect? I think I I also feel like I don't know. I think you can have a completely different experience if you simply went to school like 2 miles away. And it really just depends on like who are your coworkers? How is the school structured? How do like how do they view the students? How do they treat the students? Like all these things can drastically affect like how you teach. And I think it's unfortunate that maybe some students don't or some teachers don't have the right fit when they start out being a teacher and then they immediately get burnt out. Whereas if they found a better fit, they could have stayed in the profession a lot longer.
Damn, that's sad because that also seems like really outside of your control in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, like where you
Yeah.
like what even city you end up living in. Um,
Yeah. Because usually you just take the first job that accepts you, you know? So it is kind of hard.
yeah, that's good advice for me as I'm job hunting in my own
Yeah.
field. So we'll see. But
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's all really good advice, and it's been really nice talking to you and nice catching up. It's been a really long time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for such thoughtful questions. I don't usually get to think about these so explicitly, but it's good to, kind of voice them.
Okay, that's my job. So.